hackathons was not like really a huge focus for Devil in the beginning, especially like spending a lot of money for the top funnel was not a huge focus. And this dramatically changed in Web3, where we have like every month a few hackathons around the world with hundreds of thousands of prize pools per hackathon even. Eve Denver this year topped their hackathon prize pool with over like $1 million in USDC, which was kind of like not heard of in Web2 before. And this is kind of like the difference where it strikes immediately, where Web3 spends a lot of money to not only make it possible to chase really nice prices and bring their dev tooling to the best place where it can be, but also makes it possible for people to just travel around the world while having fun building new applications.
Welcome to the Deus Ex Style podcast.
Welcome everybody to another Deus Ex Style podcast. This is your host rture, and today I'm joined by Rick from OpenQ, and we're going to talk about the dev relations. So developers are really important in the crypto ecosystem, like they're basically the lifeblood pushing the ecosystem forward and building everything we're playing with, or sometimes actually using for real transactional value. And we'll also be chatting about the role of hackathons, and we'll dig a little bit deeper into what OpenQ is and how it helps hackathons, projects, ecosystem in finding developers. So without further ado, welcome Rick to our podcast. Could you introduce yourself and tell us how you ended up in developer relationships?
Yeah. Hey, thanks, man, for taking me in. So, yeah, I'm the founder of OpenQ, and OpenQ is a project that started around 2 years ago at the hackathon itself. Our background is also in developer relations, and OpenQ evolved into multiple steps where right now it is mainly focusing on a CRM for developer relations. So, we're building an experience that's similar to HubSpot or other CRMs that people are familiar with when they do normal business, but highly focusing on dev tooling companies that have developers as consumers of their product. So that's kind of like our main focus right now.
Awesome. And I think it's quite a unique product because through the years, we see companies market more and more to developers and making their product attractive to developers instead of attractive to managers who often have to make the decisions on the budget. So I think we've come to a point in time where this type of tooling and this service is actually very relevant and just in time to service those customers. But I think developer relationships isn't something that's being talked a lot in public in crypto. It just maybe sometimes happens, or people just know that there are hackathons. Could you tell us a little bit, like, what is your definition of dev relations, and how could people like nurture them and sustain their connection with the developers?
Yeah. So it started around 2010, where companies were more aware that they need to be make it very easy for their applications to be easily integratable with other applications. That's where the need for good documentation of APIs or SDKs were becoming more and more relevant. And some companies were very smart early on and understood that this needs a separate position in the company, a team that has specific or is creating specific expertise in this area to keep developer relations in a spot where they can take care of everything in regards to that. So companies like Twilio started early, but then also companies quickly like Stripe evolved, which brought a new product to the market that focused really just on targeting developers as a customer. Stripe literally just made that their main business model, that they didn't talk to company CEOs and instead just to CTOs, which then had also the decision-making power. And this type of decision-making power kind of translated more and more into other areas where DevRel became more and more important, where devs, went out of the cubicle and became like not just developers building products, but also decision makers. So the way how I describe DevRels is it has like there are two like areas. On one side, it's hands-on business development, but really with the focus on the consumer level of a developer, which is very different from any other type of consumer in the industry. And then there's the second type of developer relations, which is developer relations engineer that focuses on good documentation of the product, YouTube tutorials, or any other kind of video material that you need. And then also going to hackathons and giving people hands-on support when they're participating to make sure that the integration of their tooling is working smoothly.
Yeah, so it's I think a little bit of a combination between just good marketing and then finding the target group, but also just educating, because your products that are being marketed are quite complex, and probably only somebody with knowledge of like such tech can make decisions on that.
Yep.
So that's I think really important. And just to be clear, this developer relationships you started basically with Twilio and Stripe are like more Web2 companies. So this is not only a crypto specific problem. It's
Correct.
It's all around the world, and it's I think being shared across like Web2 and Web3. As long as there are developers and companies building something for developers, this topic is relevant.
Correct. Yeah.
So what's the status right now? Like, how are devs being found? Is it like through online? Are hackathons like the main go-to place to find a developer for your project? Like, what's the process for like finding devs to either use your product or have them work for you and hire them?
Yeah, it's very interesting. The Web3 industry versus all the other industries is working very differently. It has a different approach to developer relations in general, especially when it comes to the top funnel. So in traditional developer relations with products outside of Web3, normally what they do is just focus on a very good documentation, good material, YouTube videos, guides on like building like first applications with the API or SDK they're providing to give some examples, all these kinds of things. And then obviously they also go to conferences, but hackathons was not like really a huge focus for DevRel in the beginning, especially like spending a lot of money for the top funnel was not a huge focus. And this dramatically changed in Web3, where we have like every month a few hackathons around the world with hundreds of thousands of prize pools per hackathon even. Eve Denver this year topped their hackathon prize pool with over like $1 million in USDC, which was kind of like not heard of in Web2 before. And this is kind of like the difference where it strikes immediately, where Web3 spends a lot of money to not only make it possible to chase really nice prices and bring their dev tooling to the best place where it can be, but also makes it possible for people to just travel around the world while having fun building new applications. So yeah, definitely in Web2 and Web3 has kind of changed a bit in that sense, in the way how they approach developer relations.
That's actually great to hear. Like, I've been trying to get into a hackathon. I hopefully I'll get into the Eat Global one during Istanbul, which is, I'm not really a developer, but I'm more of a data analyst. But I think developer relations is not only about like finding the programmers that just built the app. Is it also about finding people that either support the developers or at least write some code that's not in production but supporting like data flows? How wide should we take developer relationships here?
Yeah, it depends on the stage of each individual company or DAO, whatever organization type you have. So if you're starting out with a dev tool, or if you recently launched your blockchain on a testnet or something, then you're really caring about the top funnel, meaning you get as many people as possible to test your product. In that sense, your focus are really like just developers itself that will give you feedback if the documentation is clear, if the tech works, and all these kind of things. After a while, when you've like started to funnel and got a lot of feedback, that's when you want to shift your attention more towards the bottom funnel, which means you want to bring not only like developers on board, but actually create teams that utilize your technology in a way that they become relevant and they start using your product and more intensively. So, for example, with a blockchain, you want to have products that bring volume on your blockchain. So in an example, if you're a new blockchain, you want to find teams that build decentralized exchanges, that build indexers, all these kind of things that are very relevant components. So that's what you focus on. And then it goes also and branches outside of the developer relation part itself. You're focusing also on founders. Founders is actually even the more important part here, where you're looking at people that are possible or capable to raise funds, either via grants or via VCs, where you look at people that have a talent to attract new people in. And obviously, developers still a very important part of your daily work, but you want to find teams that are utilizing your technology, improving your technology versus other ecosystems, where this then becomes quickly kind of like a war, who is kind of like attracting the most teams. This is kind of like something I think most people don't understand, because a lot of people make assumptions about like how many active developers are there on ecosystems, but it's not as relevant if you're looking, more long term, compared to like how many active startups are actually building with that technology and depending on that technology.
Yeah, so there is also a difference in quality versus quantity in that aspect.
Correct. Yeah.
You want like builders that really build and use the technology versus just a lot of people who maybe just use one feature, or it's not the main part of the product that's being used. So I can totally understand that. And I would like to go back to the hackathon part, because I think since it's mostly marketed at developers, and like the general public mostly sees the results, like which projects won, I think it would be good to create some context on how such a hackathon basically is organized, and how developers come there with expectations, how they build, how they are incentivized. So maybe let's take it from the start. Who's organizing these hackathons, and why would they benefit from doing hackathons?
And there are two types. And the ones that they're like for-profit companies, and on the other side there are groups of people or companies that do it nonprofit, to either leverage their own brand or their own company. So, for example, Eve Global is obviously a company that's doing it also for a profit to organize all these events, but they do a really, really good job. I would say there's nobody else in the industry that is capable of having such a huge lineup of hackathons every month and is executing them so well. On the other side, there are nonprofit communities that do this. So, for example, with Eve Rome, which is a hackathon in Rome that is running for the first time next week in the beginning of October. This is essentially a group of people that were like-minded in Rome, meeting up in meetups, and then they decided they want to bring a hackathon to their country for the first time in Web3. They organized a Discord channel where everybody could volunteer in various different positions, like from managing sponsorship to venue to all kinds of things that hackathon organizers need. And they don't plan to make a profit. Everything that is essentially in the bank after the hackathon, they want to use to organize the next hackathon, which right now they are just investing and self-funding everything. So these types usually that run these, and then often, obviously, like the E Foundation is sponsoring them.
Yeah, and so it can be like bottom-up, community-driven, or like more like companies or organizations that have been doing this for a long time. And I always feel that there is even if it's a for-profit organization, it's really about like having a good feeling and having a good environment to build and let like creativity or free ideas flow. So people are very encouraged to just come in with their own ideas and build something original. And I think if you do that with like such a big group, there will always be something useful or something very interesting that will either trigger a new project, and there will, they continue building after the hackathons, or will inspire others.
Yeah.
So I feel, even though that those prize pools are often like quite big and impressive, it's needed to basically nurture all those new ideas and get people thinking like, hey, what's really missing in this space, and what do you want to contribute?
Yeah.
And for developers, you mentioned that like there are developers just going from hackathon to hackathon and basically living from that, making it almost like a job to just build projects, try to win prizes. What's your sense on like what types of developers, or maybe also non-developers, go to these hackathons?
Yeah, I think those people are very smart. They look at hackathons very different if they are making a living out of it compared to others. Like normally you go to a hackathon and you have a cool idea and you build it, and then you'll see if any of those prizes and technologies that offer those prizes fit to your idea. Some more strategic teams take a more deeper and closer look and take a kind of a chance at those bounties that probably not a lot of people will apply for. So they're looking for technologies that a lot of people will probably won't not use, and then will create something with that. And you can quickly make upwards to 10K per hackathon even alone, if you kind of strategize in that direction. I For myself, I find it a bit too much to do these kind of things. Like it's fine if you want to travel the world and do this as kind of like a side hustle, and then you have maybe another one or two side projects. But in general, I'm more like kind of the type that enjoys building like stuff that I have in my head, and don't get too much distracted with bounties that utilize that where I have to utilize technology that I don't know how to implement. Yeah. So that these type of devs usually that do this, and then there are always people that just travel from hackathon to hackathon to network. Yeah, which is something that hackathon organizers don't particularly like much, but there are so many side events around hackathons and Web3, so that it's a worthwhile experience, even if there's no conference, to just go there and meet people.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because I think in the sign up form for Eat Global in Istanbul, you could actually select like, I'm doing it for the prizes. So
Yeah.
like maybe our honest dev would add that. So maybe they can select it out, but at least maybe they have like some honest data about that.
It's if Global's business model, I would even say, to find specifically people in that category, because imagine you become a startup that is, getting outside of ETH Global VC funding, and then starts hands-on shipping and don't participate at these hackathons anymore. That those are like less people that come up and really ship, right? So for ETH Global, it's specifically interesting to find people that come over and over again. But those are obviously people that then companies that sponsor these hackathons don't want to mainly get as its missions, because it's people that maybe give you some feedback and test. It's again, depending on the strategy you have. But if you focus on bottom funnel, which most of the sponsored at hackathons probably do, because they have already the means and the funding to spend a lot of money for these hackathons there. So bottom funnels mostly their focus in like after a year or so when having launched. So in these type of cases, they would really love to see more startups focusing on the technology and in the long run, versus just shortly building something with it.
Yeah, and this I think brings us to the point where like why is that prize pool so big? Like it's often like various projects that really want to see builders build with their technology, and the builders can apply for that. But it means that sometimes they will maybe get hunted in a way where devs might think it's like an easy bounty to go for.
Yeah, I'm constantly thinking about this. Like, if you compare, for example, the AI space, which is since GPT-4 really flourishing a lot. If you looked at that space versus Web3, they have totally different approach. So, and I believe it's a much better approach at the moment. But also, I don't know how much in kind of like the long run, these investments of like hundreds of K of prize pool have really brought us to Web3. Like, how much incentive did this give us to grow such fast in as a Web3 community? So in the AI space, what they do is they rather focus on accelerators. So they have accelerators where they bring in developers with startups, and then their main focus is not directly funding. Funding is more like a secondary aspect of it that can come with it, but the main focus is if you participate in the accelerator, you get free credits. So and as an example, if you're an AI like OpenAI, you could provide a startup with like 10, 15, or even maybe 50,000 K of credits to use their API, right? So that you can make early and profit if you're able to sell on a subscription-based model, etc., and grow your team and invest that capital that you save in credits into growing faster. I think that's a very, very valid method, and a lot of people are doing it. Also, Vercel is heavily focusing on those type of accelerators where they give startup teams credits, since everybody deploys, with Vercel in the AI space. AI, crypto or Web3 in general, I think made a mistake that they have not focused much on that aspect. They always gave away bounties, which was cash that you could utilize as you want. And like a lot of people used it to travel and for accommodations and stuff like that. But they never really focused on credits in the sense of like gasless transactions for an application. This is something that is coming now more and more. And I see like some teams that want to make it simple to just give people credits so that their applications can run for free. And account extracted wallets are also supporting that natively now. You don't have to set up like a gas station network as you used to have to support free transactions. That's something we should have done much, much earlier in Web3. I think that was a huge mistake because essentially in the last 2 years where transactions were due to side chains and other layer 2s now cheap, it was very much possible to give those startups like the possibility to onboard users without them ever interacting with a transaction to interact with the dApp. Yeah, so that's something I think that should change, and it still hasn't been catching up on much. But you see it more and more, especially like the Lens protocol, for example, is doing that really well, where they're trying to let those social networks run without letting the users pay for making those transactions.
That's a good point. And I think maybe the technology just wasn't there yet with like you could sponsor gas, but I think in a way you could still give away free subscriptions, like some data products or RPC providers could still provide those credits and have that be part of the prize. So let's hope maybe the space goes more toward that. But I think in a way, still some bounty would be helpful, especially for the ones that really have to travel to the hackathon. But maybe there's a good middle way between them. So you don't have people just going full for the bounty and then just launching another project that just dies off. So you get a balance between like people getting a little bit reimbursed for their costs and then putting them on a path where they can further develop their product and their ID.
Yeah, it's just interesting to see, like in Web3 you see every month these hackathons and you can travel around the world. In AI they make those things remotely online and they just focus on products that ship fast and bring in customers and make profits. And then those profits will increase because they don't have to pay for the dev tool once they start out. So it's kind of like a completely different mindset where you tell the developers like, hey, you need to become profitable fast, you need to build something that has meaning to prove that your idea is valid, versus in Web3 where people are building POC after POC, never actually targeting a problem that people resonate with and utilize, and that has become like a huge problem. I think if you look at, we did this research last year. If you look at how high the percentages of projects that are continuing to develop their hackathon idea after hackathon, it's extremely low. We actually built a script on GitHub and scraped all kinds of hackathon organizers platforms to find all the projects. And we not only looked into specifically the repos of the hackathon, we also looked into repositories that possibly were recreated and utilized, similar technologies and stuff. So normally at the hackathon, you build from scratch after the hackathon. So we took these kind of things into account, and the percentage was very low. It was around 3% to 2% that the projects continued. And generally, even if that's kind of fine as well, I think it's a bit unfortunate that we build so much and we don't really utilize it. We don't even clean it up at the hackathon, that people could continue with that idea if it's open source, which it is most of the time.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think you will need a lot of ideas, also just fail or just be that experiment and not eventually being continued, but maybe somebody else, like if it's on a GitHub and you at least show like to the world, like this was my idea, I'm not continuing it, but feel free to just fork it and go ahead. So if you need it or you want to incorporate that in like your library or framework, let me know, or just take it and start building. So it's great you did some research on the continuation here. Would that maybe also lead to building like for hackathons, building a database or building some reputational score for these devs, where they could like find out like, okay, these people, they're serious, these people are serial hackathon participants that just go here for the prizes? Is that something where you see this going, or is there like some other ethical reason why you would or would not want that?
Yeah, no, I mean, exactly what you describe is what is kind of part of our product line. So with our CRM, we're trying to make it easier for companies to track developer activities. We have a GitHub scraper, and then also we utilize Google's BigQuery indexer that indexes GitHub to track all kinds of events, and then we can see for our customers if developers utilize that technology, even if they don't know about them. So these kind of statistics we provided, first of all, to the companies. That's our business model, but we want to also provide more in general developer ecosystem reports that are very accurate. Because if you look at, for example, what Electric Capital is doing with their developer report, an essential piece that they are missing is that if a blockchain submits projects that are building something on their blockchain on GitHub, yes, you can check if those projects are still active, but you don't check if maybe this project is dead because they've recreated a new repository with the same technology usage. So for an example, if I build something on Ethereum at the hackathon now, an organizer would submit that project as a project being in the Ethereum ecosystem, and it would be showing up in the developer report. However, what if this developer, after the hackathon or whatever they did in this project, they drop it and they rebuild something from scratch in a new repo, they still deploy on Ethereum mainnet, you would completely lose that person in the statistic. And that's exactly the different approach that we're taking, where we're looking not only at the GitHub repository overall that a customer gives us and asks us to analyze. We look at the whole history of the developers. So we take a look at their profile. We scrape every single repository they have ever interacted with or they created. And then we look in those files where we can find the technology and see if they're in which kind of projects that they interacted with, are they utilizing this technology, and then how active are they in those. And that's how we can actually bring much more accurate data that really helps you to see the full ecosystem that is running. Obviously, closed source is a kind of like not directly in the statistics at the moment. We're working on the solutions to make that possible more for the customer, and then customer can opt in to release that also publicly in reports that we're planning to release. But that's kind of like the main thing, what we started to do these type of GitHub analytics and extend upon these and support Web3 companies specifically to get a bit of better view about developer activities.
Yes, because I can imagine that like not every, like especially not every piece of code is on GitHub, and people use GitHub in a different way. Like some people push every small piece of new code to the GitHub, and some wait for commits and
Yep.
push them to before pushing them, having some like tests done, because it is public, and maybe you have to wait for the functions or whatever piece of code you're building to finalize. So that different behavior might have an influence on your statistics, of course, but it might also like give developers a chance to just show you as OpenQ, like, hey, we're still building something. Like, how would you tackle that? Like, if a dev says, like, we have some code being deployed, or we have some development going on, but it's not being pushed to GitHub, could they then submit that data to you?
The rate that people use GitHub is very high. I would say just estimating over 95% of the projects use GitHub in blockchain and Web3. Generally also because GitHub is kind of like the place where open source is released versus like GitLabs that's used by a lot of companies that work closed source. So in general, if companies decide or startups decide to not release open source code directly, their long-term plan is to still publish it at some point. So we're just losing them out of the statistic for the time being. But the good thing is that after they go open source, we have the commit history that is also showing the history when they were private, and then we can kind of include that in our reports afterwards. And the second part is, which is something we're working on right now, that a company can request the developer to opt in and share their activity levels. So that would be something like a bot that they can install, and then the bot would not store the code base, but just essentially store the commits and the activity of the commits, and then that would be shared with the dev tooling company. So that's kind of like an opt-in solution that we're working on, but there are a couple other ways that we're thinking about this that always, are opt-in. Like obviously we never will like try to figure out stuff that developers do without asking them for their permission. And with open source data, there's no like kind of like privacy right that we're infringing, because it's public data that you can look up on GitHub yourself. We're just automating it and making it easier for people to figure out who's active and who's not.
Yeah, that's a great solution, and of course like a great feature of Git, that like all the changes are being tracked. So if you ingest that data correctly, you can still see that whole tree. Which brings me to another point, I think, where you can probably also see like the quality of commits, like this type of behavior I described before, where some people, for a few lines of code, they keep pushing to GitHub to maybe make some metrics better for them, like look like they're super active. Well, they're maybe not. Well, you can also probably see some teams like releasing these features, but like doing that in like big chunks and like big product updates. Are those metrics you're following too and indexing?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. We've been thinking a lot about how to interpret commits. If you look at, for example, front-end development versus back-end development, or even Solidity development, like changing a couple lines in Solidity can take a lot of hours of work, versus creating like hundreds of lines of HTML and CSS code can be very fast. So if you were to compare those two developers, like a front-end developer with a back-end developer, and you were just measuring their activity levels based on the amounts of commits or PRs, that wouldn't be very helpful. So what we're doing is, instead of doing this approach of taking the amount of commits into account, we more look at average commit consistency. So if you, for example, are a backend developer and you're committing consistently, for example, 2 to 5 commits per day, and you're capable to keep that level of consistency over the couple weeks, then you're very active. And the same goes for a front-end developer that does 50 to 60 commits per week and does that consistently. If then you're not consistent anymore, and like the week after you're doing less, that would then kind of we kind of take your own level of consistency as a reference to decide whether you're still active or not.
Yeah, it's great to have those additional metrics, and I think with all this data, we get to the question, like, who would actually be interested in this data, and who would be your end user of OpenQ. So which parties are your typical user base, or are maybe not in your user base but should definitely check OpenQ out because you think you would be very valuable to them?
Yeah, so we have 3 types of customer. The first part are like dev tooling companies. And if I say dev tooling company, I also count in blockchains and protocols. So those are not like just Web2 companies like Stripe, what we had talked about earlier, but then also obviously, products in the Web3 space, protocols, for example, Superfluid, like token streaming protocols, blockchains in general, and really any kind of product that is trying to sell something to a developer for free or for a charge. The Web3 space specifically has this kind of special nuance where if you deploy a contract, you're an anonymous developer, so you're an anonymous user. So that's why in Web3 it's even more relevant to have such kind of product like ours, because we kind of help them to better understand who their users are. We can track from GitHub like geolocation. In many cases, people share that publicly. We can track their email address if they share this publicly on GitHub. So there's like all these kind of things that we know by just checking GitHub repositories that you wouldn't know if you just do chain analytics, for example, where you just know, okay, 20,000 new contracts were deployed this month, but you have really no idea what they're up to. And so that's kind of like in Web3 even more relevant, where you want to know more about your users and understand how active those users are and compare them with each other, so that you as a developer can set a better focus. Then for Web2 dev tooling companies, it's still very relevant to just generally have this activity on GitHub, specifically for new customers, like new leads that haven't used the product yet in a use case but are playing around with it. The second type of customers are recruitment companies or general like big HR departments that use our tool to find developers or kind of do due diligence on developers that they've been already tracking or that apply for a job. So it works really well to do these kind of things. We analyze the skill sets of a developer, the kind of frameworks they're familiar with, all these kind of things. And if you're a recruiter and you're looking for a developer that has deployed a contract before, we can kind of filter all these kind of things. So recruiters and recruitment in general is very interesting. And then investors are also like the third pillar, where they can do due diligence on startups that want to fundraise. They can see how active those startups are, and specifically not technical investors can do a bit clearer from a technical background due diligence on those startups. But then they can also track their portfolio and see across their portfolio who's building a lot, if it's open source, which in the Web3 space is a lot of startups are. And then the kind of like last aspect where developer relations or dev tooling companies and investors come together is when you have a portfolio company, for example, that is a blockchain. Yeah, in the Web3 space, we have a lot of VCs that have invested in blockchains directly. And imagine if those blockchains use our product, they could share those statistics with investors directly, not only because they want to like validate themselves and saying like, hey, we have a lot of active developers, but also to kind of boost their bottom funnel. So if you are a blockchain, you want that all those products that are being built on your project on your blockchain are growing, that they get fundraising. And if you kind of like share your database of active developers with investors can then invest as well in your ecosystem. It's like growing together, right? So investors usually invest in a blockchain, and then afterwards they invest in products that are built on those blockchains, right? They double down on that. So those kind of like that kind of data helps then investors to better quantify in which projects they should invest in ecosystems that they have already invested previously before.
Yes, because that's probably something you're tracking too, like the retention rate of these developers. It's not only like top of funnel, we run an indexer to find a new developer you can recruit or attract to your ecosystem or protocol or blockchain. It's also about like, hey, what developers are currently building and what are they building? What types of tooling are they using? Like you can probably also see legacy code, even though like maybe that doesn't really exist yet in Web3, maybe from my inexperienced point of view, but you can actually get a good overview like how they're developing, right? Like what tooling.
Exactly. You can, like, for example, if you're an investor that has invested in smart contract deployment framework and then also into a blockchain, you can check, for example, for all projects that are deployed on this projects on this blockchains, like how many of them are using also this smart contract deployment framework that we've invested in. So they can like cross-reference multiple investments that they've made with developers utilizing those companies or those tools, and then they can make investments to further give more value to those already previously made investments.
That's I think great tracking, because of course like a company can come with the data themselves, but having an external party verify that is also very useful. Which maybe brings us like to a point where like where does OpenQ then stop? Because an investor might also be interested in like how many people are using like these smart contracts, or how many people cross through the website. Is that also data you will be incorporating, or do you want to leave that to like other like CRM like systems? And can some of these systems even be integrated, or will your data be integrated with these systems?
Yeah, it will be kind of both. So you also provide an API so that other people can utilize our own analytics for GitHub specific use cases. But we're working on integration with Discord right now, or we can do sentiment analysis on your Discord server and can tell how many active users do you have, which of those users are asking most frequently what type of questions. We're working on a gating service so that you have developer support channels on Discord where people have to authenticate with GitHub to ask a question, and then they will automatically be onboarded as well to the CRM, so that devs can see, like, out of all those people that are asking questions, who are they, and are they really utilizing our technology, or are they just asking questions to never really build something with it. So Discord is kind of like the second most important data source that we're working towards too. But there are a lot of other things, like we want to work on website analytics and then cross-reference website analytics with GitHub analytics. So, for example, let's say you make a campaign or a sponsorship on a conference, we can tell you, okay, you got 10,000 new visitors on a website, and that translated in, for example, 50 new dependency package downloads. Yeah. So those type of like references we want to make, but then also go deep in, if you launch, for example, educational content, what type of engagement does this educational content create, and how does it translate in people, again, utilizing the technology, and maybe also in retention. So we're looking at multiple different type of data sources that we want to incorporate to give like a full picture for developer relation that just not takes GitHub only as a reference, but leverage this to cross-reference other data sources together.
Yeah, and I think like this is what most, like if you're not a data analyst or haven't run like indexers or done web scraping, like you need to work towards a single point of truth. And one piece of information is just one part of that truth, but if you can get that back or verified from various sources, it will only have like a higher probability of being the truth. So integrating all those sources will will verify that data more and more, but also can give the user probably more control over like what segments they want to take a look at, or like from what point of view they want to look at that data. So yeah, looking forward to seeing all that data being also added to OpenQ, because that will unlock even more functionality. That's, I think, like, data analysis is never a ending like venture, because yeah, you're with every new insight you'll probably have a new question, like, but how does this user segment react, or like how do these developers feel about this type of tooling if I would give it to them. So
Yeah.
that's great. You're looking into those like additional data sources too.
Yeah, and like I said, like the DevRel space really has at the moment in Web3 no way to measure like the ROI when they sponsor hackathons. For example, they don't know how many people have interacted with the technology before, how many are new people, how many are like coming back as a already active user, and then after the hackathon, how many are still active. Yeah, so those type of analysis they cannot provide, and that's specifically because of the nature of Web3, which I highlighted before, because those people are anonymous, right? So if they don't fill out the form themselves, telling the DevRel that they've interacted with it before, there's really no means to tell aside from going into the GitHub repositories and checking it out yourself. So yeah, that's kind of very relevant versus like API products where you could just see if people, register with a centralized like Google account or whatever, and you can see if people put their credit card in and pay for those tokens.
Yeah, it's a different point of view you're taking at like the real world, through a different data source. I have you like this because it's like quite a new idea. How are you targeting like companies to work with you? Have you got like already like customers onboarded? Have they given some feedback to you, like what they actually are doing with this data right now?
Yeah, so we started when we first like validated this idea to work directly with hackathon sponsors together. Some of our friends are DevRels in the Web3 space, so we kind of built the product with them while validating the idea. So very early on, we worked with Superfluid together and Polygon to make this product or to bring this product into the direction that they can utilize it. And then from there, right now we onboard around 5 companies, which you will be seeing on our website and maybe in the next couple of weeks, and you can check out their profiles. But most of the value that we give them for now is just checking out the ROI and setting KPIs for hackathons and conferences and events and stuff. And then they also want to use it as a centralized communication point where you can invite team members. It's pretty funny that now everybody uses Telegram as a way to connect in Web3. You use private phones and you use a lot of DMs, and the communication gets lost, right? So that's what HubSpot and CRMs like Salesforce, they were trying to bring the communication as a team together so that we know what stage each customer is when, for example, your teammate leaves the team or is sick or something. That's something we are bringing back for developer relations, which hasn't been implemented yet in their flow, and it's highly needed. That's also something that they tell us, and with a Telegram integration that we're working on right now, this will be then even better, aside from just email. So analytics and then centralizing that communication is kind of like the most important aspect of it that our customers right now are looking for, and that's something that developers will benefit a lot, because how often as a developer were you ghosted by DevRels, or they just didn't have the time to text you back, and then they switched the team, they went to a different department, or they worked even for a different company, and you're starting from scratch. It's like very tedious for you as a developer that just needs some help or specifically feedback. Yeah. So some companies are really good at that. Some companies are not that good of managing those relations, and we just want to provide a tool set that makes it easier for you to do that overall, so that developers are happy.
You point to one of like my frustration, and from like some friends of mine who were like actively looking for a job in crypto. Like they go through the process of like setting up a CV, making cover letters, like putting in effort to reach out to a company, and then just not hearing back from them, which I think is such a bad look. Like not even responding to the people who put in effort or might be enthusiastic in joining your team, even if you like have hundreds respondents to the application. I would still at least give them a message like, okay, you might not be a person we're looking for right now, or never could also be
Yeah.
the case, of course. But at least some response lets them know you've looked at the response, looked at their CV, and they can close that, unless like they they
Yeah.
might also be waiting for a response. And in my opinion, like if I have like written to some of these companies, I look back at them right now and I'm like, yeah, you didn't even took the effort to make a response. So it's also just a bad look. Like I take you less serious right now. And the ones that gave a response, I'm like, oh, that's fine. It could be a simple mail with some words like, yeah, we're not interested, but at least it was taken seriously.
Yeah, that was also our experience when we initially created OpenQ at a hackathon. We were working on a hackathon that was sponsored by a dev tool, and we were utilizing at the time. We were runner-ups at the hackathon. We didn't win it because our use case was not really directly the use case they were looking for. And after the hackathon, we still utilized that technology and we tried to keep in touch with them. We applied for a grant, we didn't get it. But for us, what was really important, just getting like maybe once a month, like a quick message, like, hey, how's it going? Like, are you still using the technology? Can we help you? Can we give you some introductions to investors? Can we maybe do a podcast or like a social media post? Like, there's this type of competition that you're working with in Web3, where if you don't provide that, people just go away and use a different tool set that is providing similar features. So that is, in all areas, when you work with bridges, oracles, if you have blockchains, all these people, like if they don't specifically work with the developer together, the developer can just switch to another ecosystem if that ecosystem sounds like they are more helpful for your journey. And it happened to us. We kind of like shifted away from using that technology and we built our own. And like a year or two later, they reached out to us and asked us for our stages. Like that was specifically kind of like the first time the light went on for me to say like, okay, we spend so much money on sponsoring these hackathons, like hundreds of thousands of prize pools. And then there are people that are startups, they fundraise, they're really driven, they want to build something cool, and then you don't even respond to their message or send them a message every once in a while to ask them how's it going. This is like something that needs to change in DevRel, and that happens quite a lot. And I know it's hard, like you work with hundreds of developers together, so it's hard to kind of figure out who you should talk to, who's serious, who's like just somebody that is looking for an airdrop and is trying to steal your time. And that's exactly what we want to like improve with OpenQ. Yeah, so we want to make it possible for startups that were like us to stand out by just pushing code so that they get the help they need.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, we need to, of course, take care of like this the Sybil, even if whether it's a wallet or a dev that's just trying to go for a bounty. But I think those upholding those dev relations is very important, and they might get lost maybe because we're all using such telegrams and DMs. So having a way to manage that like outside of like Airtables or Excel sheets, where you not only ingest like direct data where somebody has to manually update like, oh, we still are in contact, like what's the status of this relationship, is the dev still active in the space or in the ecosystem, like that automatically being updated. I think that's where definitely is a great value point for OpenQ. So great to have like also my experience being confirmed that it's not only me having this problem of not getting responses. could be like
No,
would
that's an
be
experience we
weird.
all make.
Yeah, sadly it is. But maybe, maybe the space starts growing and gets a little bit like more professional in that aspect too. Working from like smaller teams, like there's not always time to handle that. So hopefully this space can grow a little bit. That even smaller teams start taking this seriously. And give either like feedback to the dev or like the project building with their tooling or on their blockchain. I think we discussed almost like all aspects of OpenQ, but maybe if we haven't discussed some feature or some part of OpenQ that you really want to discuss. The floor is yours. What are we still missing, or what are companies in crypto still missing that you could offer, or you want feedback on? Because I think this could also be a great moment to give a shout out for people to get in contact with you and build.
Yeah, I think we went through most of the important parts of what we're trying to do. I really just like to advocate, especially in Web3, for those type of solutions that we touched on, where you work on credit-based bounties versus like just money. I think the mindset in Web3 was quite for a long time problematic, where we don't charge people for utilizing a protocol. Then if you create something competitively and you don't fundraise, it's very hard to make create a team and create a startup, bootstrap a startup. So I think that mindset generally needs to change a bit. Obviously, I'm very well all in for public goods. I love public goods, but I think making a profit to be able to pay your living costs and your accommodations when you travel and also that kind of stuff, that's fine. So as long as we don't try to squeeze as much as possible out of a product, then I think we need to change that mindset that things should be for free all the time, and then it's very hard to compete with each others if you set up a fee. So these are the type of things that I would like to advocate for, that we maybe think about this if it's the right way approach, and that we make sure that Web3 applications in general are focusing more towards a product market fit versus, just, I don't know, like a lot of people still think about token raises or generally have a token, like those type of things. If whoever still believes in that they will launch a token with a dApp product and it has meaning, I think those people are kind of going to be left behind in the next years. Like the use case needs to be, and the product market fit focus should be really just that you shouldn't focus on anything else. And I think Web3 needs more of these kind of startups. And I'm very, very positive that now with account abstracted wallets and MPC wallets, we're going to have it much easier to onboard users outside of Web3. And yeah, those are the kind of topics I'm mostly really interested in. When we build OpenQ, we want to build it because we want to make sure that dev tools are more easier to utilize, and then also that developers get the support they need, which is something we found out it's a huge problem. But I'm still very passionate in general about Web3, even though our current product is not doing a lot of chain analytics. It's just overall a very cool space to be in. And if we focus on getting those products now into the market so that they don't just have a USP that is saying like, hey, this is decentralized application, you own your own data, but you find USPs that have actual meaning beyond that. That's kind of like the main focus, and that's also the focus DevRels should tackle. Like when they talk to developers, they should try to challenge them exactly in that aspect of like, how is this decentralized application any different to another one, and make it clear to them that a USP is not because it uses Web3, it's a feature, which is a very good feature, and that's cool. But if you build like a social media network, that's based on like any of these dev tools that are recently out, like Farcaster or Lens, like you should find an idea that is similar to the idea where TikTok, built something that went competitive with Instagram and YouTube. Like you should find this next type of TikTok thing, and DevRels need to focus on this, that they can help startups to figure these things out specifically. And that's something every hackathon happens a lot, where people just build a decentralized Twitter clone or a decentralized Airbnb clone, and then they think adding a tokenized process in that makes a lot of sense, and it's great and it's cool, and that's fine. It's fine to learn these things, but the bottom funnel should be really clear on those kind of things. Don't matter much. It's focuses on, or you should focus on new ideas, and that's, I think, what we should kind of take out of this the most. That's something in Web3 we should go back to, or even start thinking about more, which is something I rarely see even now at the new hackathons.
Yeah, I fully agree with like the various points. I feel that projects right now, when they're racing, try to go a little bit more for the product market fit, but still you see a lot of like token deals where it doesn't make sense for the product. And I what I think resonates a little bit more with me too is we should go maybe a little bit step back, like to Web 2.5, where we focus on onboarding users from Web 2, like give them a more Web 2 experience, but where we can and where it's actually useful, add that blockchain aspect or functionality if they want to dig deeper. But I think we're just seeing the first tooling around that. Like account abstraction will be a big part. I think gaming might be a sector where this will be explored a lot, like having just a normal flow, but with extra functionality from like Web3, like blockchain technology. So it's an interesting time, and hopefully we will see that mentality also flip in hackathons, which hopefully also the hackathon organizers start to incentivize a little bit more, which could be like definitely through like such incentives like free credits or free subscriptions. So
it's really crazy to me that at this point in time we've still not created, after investing so much money, Web3 applications that have like a meaning outside of it, that are like kind of challenging the current competitive landscape in Web2. Like if you look at the biggest applications in general, aside from DEXs and like heavy DeFi applications, there's not a real challenger, and even those are kind of like struggling still, right, to become competitive. We'll have centralized exchanges. So yeah, that's something I think we should focus on, and that's like one of my most interesting like aspects around OpenQ, that I want to make sure that those hackathons are organized in a way that they focus a bit more on the product market fit and not just on building a POC that's cool, because that's something we just in general need. And then afterwards, I think once we have that done, I think what you said, like going a bit back, that's very important. Focus a bit more on what matters. And yeah, in general, I think the overall like technology marketing that we made about blockchain, that everybody needs to understand it and everybody needs to be in it and needs to see why this is like revolutionizing and the way how we interact with the internet. I think that was a bit of a too much of a sell that now a lot of people don't care about in outside of Web3 anymore. It was just a kind of like a hype, and we need to, that's why we need to focus on building applications that have a meaning outside of Web3, and Web3 is just a component of technology that then users will appreciate in the long run.
Yeah, good point and good shout out. For the listeners who are interested in OpenQ or like chatting up with you, like where can they reach you? And we'll make sure to add those in the show notes to those links.
Yeah, you can go on our website, openq.dev, and then my Twitter account is rickdev, RICKK. Yeah, just give me a DM. I usually respond to everyone, and I'm happy to answer any kind of questions when it's about the DevRel topic. I'm very passionate about it.
And maybe like last question, what's the next hackathon after October you're going to, so maybe people can see you in real life?
Eve Rome, but that one will probably happen before we release this podcast. So Istanbul is probably the next one that I'm gonna be, and then maybe also Eve India. Let's see. I want to also go to the Web Summit again, even though unfortunately this year there's no like blockchain hackathon like it was last year. I think it's really cool to go back to those Web2 conferences and talk to other companies and learn what they're about and how they believe these kind of Web3 these Web3 companies are bringing in. So yeah, maybe I'm going to be there as well.
Awesome. Yeah, so a lot of opportunities to meet you and the OpenQ team. Thank you, Rick, for coming on our podcast, and see you later.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the Deus Ex DAO podcast, a place where some of the most progressive and innovative builders, thought leaders, and traders in the crypto space come together to discuss all areas of the crypto industry. Whether you're into DeFi, Layer 1s, Layer 2s, NFTs, or anything in between, we've got you covered. And as a reminder, nothing said on this podcast should be construed as financial advice or as a solicitation to buy or sell any digital asset or security. The comments, views, and opinions expressed by the hosts or guests on the podcast are their own. As always, you'll need to do your own research.